Good afternoon, members. If I could start the meeting with the first agenda item, which is notification of Chair and Vice Chair. And at the full council meeting on 20th of May, Councillor Alison Whelan was appointed the Chair for the municipal year, and Councillor Lawrence Damari Homan was appointed as the Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you all for being here today. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public or press who have joined us today, either in person or watching via the live stream, to this meeting of the Community Social Mobility and Inclusion Committee at Newshire Hall in Alconbury. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, but could I please request that members of the committee and the public turn their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. I would remind everyone present that the meeting will be live streamed and a recording will be placed on the Council's website. The meeting will be adjourned every 2 hours for a short comfort break. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting and we will leave the room by the side door and use the external fire exit to the assembly point in the car park. Okay. First of all, I'd like to add an additional item on here. I think it would be quite useful if we just run around the room and introduce ourselves. So I'm Alison Whelan. I am the County Councillor for Ely North. Perhaps everyone could introduce themselves. If I could hand over to Sue first and go around in this.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Councillor Whelan. So my name is Sue Grace. I'm Executive Director for Strategy and Partnerships and the member of the leadership team with responsibility for supporting this committee. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lisa Riddle. I'm a Service Director for Communities, Libraries and Skills and responsible for a number of the services that report into this committee.
I'm Daniel Devine for Chatteris. Hello.
Bryony Goodliff, member for Cherry Hinton in Cambridge City, and I'm here as a substitute today.
Also here as substitute, I'm Tom Hawker-Dawson for Soham South and Hadnam.
Hi, my name is Lido George. I'm Councillor for Huntingdon North and Hartford, and I'm also a substitute for Samandaho here. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Peter Fain. I'm one of the members for Sawston and Shelford.
When you said run around the room, I thought I was going to have to do it again. Unless my name is Jeff Seave, Councillor for St Neots, the Eatons. Thank you.
And I'm David Levine, Councillor for Trumpington.
I'm Charlotte Lowe. I am Councillor for Somersham and Erith.
My name's Elliot Tong and I am Councillor for Abbey Ward in Cambridge City.
I'm Nick Mills, Democratic Services Deputy Manager, and I support this committee.
Afternoon, everyone. Lovely to see you all here. Lawrence Damari Homan. I'm one of the other members for the Sawston and Shelfords Ward, and I'm the Vice Chair of this committee.
Thank you all for that. With that, we'll move on to item 2 with the Democratic Service Officer report. Any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chair. There are apologies from Councillor Boulat, and Councillor Goodliff is here as a substitute. Councillor Kane with Councillor Hawker-Dawson here as a sub. Councillor Hoy with Councillor George here as a sub, and from Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you. Does any member wish to disclose any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Okay. Thank you for that. Item 3, we are asked to approve the minutes of the last committee meeting, which was held on the 27th of February 2025 as a correct record. Can I ask whether any member disagrees with the accuracy of these minutes? Jeff.
Thank you. It's not that I disagree with the minutes. I'm probably the only councillor here who was present at the last meeting before the elections. I raised a point at the end of that meeting just to draw attention to a very successful initiative that had been taking place during the course of the previous 2 years, the Capital Priority Investment initiative, which gave funding to about, I can't remember how many, 30 organisations with grants up to £40,000. Now, this was a very popular and successful initiative and gave real community involvement. And although we will not have the budget to do this sort of, take this sort of initiative this year, because the budgets have been set, I just felt that it should be an ambition of this committee to see if we can get that sort of project reinstated. And I don't think it's in the minutes, so that's why I'm raising it. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Seif, and we'll make a note of that. And certainly as the business planning process begins for the following financial year, then we'll take account of that feedback and look at that request. Thank you.
Right, members. So on that basis, I will take it that we're happy to approve the minutes as written, and we will make sure that this is looked at a point in the future. Thank you. Do officers or members have any comments on the minutes action log? No, see nothing at all. So thank you very much for that. Item 4, we've not received any public questions or petitions for today's meetings, so we will move on to item 5, which is key decision. On the grant funding agreement for Cambridgeshire Skills, which will be presented by the head of Cambridgeshire Skills, Tom Malloy. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Yeah, so I'm Tom Malloy. I'm the Head of Service for Cambridgeshire Skills, and just for new members, Cambridgeshire Skills is the adult education provider that sits within the local authority. Cambridgeshire Skills is a completely externally funded service, so we rely on grants that we receive predominantly from the combined authority to fund the delivery of the adult learning that we deliver across the county. We're just coming to the end of a current funding cycle, the end of this academic year in July, and the combined authority have informed us that they wish to continue to fund us for a further 3 years. So this paper is just asking, is making acknowledgement of receipt of that grant that we're about to receive, and also asking for permission, because under the Constitution, the combined authority, that needs to be signed as a deed under seal. So the headlines within the paper is that we have been given the security of funding for the next 3 years in total of over £6 million, so over £2 million a year in funding to deliver adult education. A slight disappointment that does mean there has been a slight reduction in funding, and that's nothing to do with our performance or our relationship with the combined authority. That's a direct result of decisions made in Westminster, which have seen a reduction in the funding that the combined authority have received, that they're able to devolve and issue out to providers. Despite that loss of funding, we are extremely confident, or more than confident, that the amount of funding that we will receive will be sufficient and won't present any risk that could lead to an overspend and any financial burden onto the authority. The one thing just to note that because of reduction in funding, it will mean a reduction in the number of learners and enrolments that we're able to make. So, you know, when you're looking at future performance, again, just to take into account that we have seen a reduction in funding. So that's it in essence. Hope, you know, relatively short and non-controversial paper to start your first committee of the new term, but open to any questions.
Thank you, Tom, for that report. And I would like to first of all say publicly here that it was really good to see the Ofsted inspection report, which demonstrates the importance or the quality of the service which is actually being delivered. From a personal perspective, that does mean that I am a little bit disappointed that we haven't got as much funding to do that, you know, going forward. Right, members. Councillor Seif.
Yes, thank you very much for that. And of course, we're all disappointed that the funding has been reduced. And you quite clearly say that there will be less opportunities or less people that you're able to bring in for the training that you've successfully offered up until now. Is there, I mean, how will you choose who doesn't get the, I mean, it's really a basic question. How are people coming forward, and will you now have to make difficult choices or more difficult choices than you had to make in the past to select the people going forward for the training?
It will be difficult, but what we are looking to do is we're not saying cutting a particular thing. It's going to be a little bit less of everything, because as a county-wide service, you know, the kind of the needs, while they're different, and thinking that we are not a college. So our provision is, you know, maths, English, digital skills, ESOL, and low-level employability. So there's a need for this across, and what we've looked at and analysed the data and where our learners are coming from is that we couldn't justify just saying, actually, we're not going to do any maths, you know, because there's a need for maths. So the reality is, we'll say we were going to have 100 maths learners, and that's not an exact figure. Well, we will have 90. So again, it's just a sort of reduction across the piece. In terms of how we decide, in effect, it's a first come basis. You know, we do target learners in particular areas, and by offering the courses that where we've seen and identified need. But in terms of turning people away, we'll be turning people away when courses are full.
Councillor Tong.
On that topic, could I get a bit more information about how many fewer enrolments there will be? Because I think this is an absolutely fantastic service that really helps empower residents and allows them to get more involved in their communities. And it is really sad to see this funding gone, well, diminished. So yeah, if they could get a bit more information about exactly how significant this impact would be, I think that would be quite useful.
It's a bit difficult to put an exact figure on this, and I'll explain why. Because different qualifications and different types of learners draw down different amounts of funding. And for example, if we had an unemployed person who had no English and maths, they would draw down significantly more funding than, say, someone who had, say, previously had a maths qualification and was in work. So in terms of putting an exact number on it, it's quite difficult. But we are estimating, and I stress it is an estimation, that it will be a reduction of around 500 learners across the academic year.
As a follow-up, sorry, and it might say this somewhere, but what percentage of the total number of learners is 500? How significant of a drop is that?
What I can do is again, we've lost about 10% of funding. So again, it's roughly going to be about that. But what I can do for members is if they want, is we do have lots of data that have been presented at different times, and actually, you know, something which is kind of an appendix which kind of can show the potential impact of this compared to where we were at the last funding year.
Right, Councillor Lowe, did you?
Thank you. With the free courses for jobs, can you explain a bit more about that? Is that for people who are unemployed and on job seekers allowance, or is it more for school leavers and people?
I think the first thing to say, all of our funding is for people who are over 19. So again, we technically recent school leavers, but not sort of, 17 or 18-year-olds. Free courses for jobs is level 3 provision, so A-level equivalent, kind of. It's not that. And while it is aimed at those who aren't in work, it can also be used to fund people who are in low-paid work. So there is the Combined Authority, and we're just waiting for the new funding rules to come out. But it's basically around what living wage is. It's normally around that. So if people are sort of around that, they're also eligible for it. So again, it's about supporting people into work or into better work.
Councillor Fane, did you?
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to ask a little bit about the impact of of this on the way that services are delivered. As you said, Mr. Malloy, Cambridgeshire Skills is not a college. I assume that in delivering this training, Cambridge Skills works with others, including adult education colleges. I don't know the details. And those colleges also have other sources of funds that may be reduced. So the direct impact of this may be difficult to measure, I assume. And I'm just wondering how the relationship with those colleges, there may be a number of colleges concerned, and the way that their own funding is reduced will impact on the overall delivery of skills training in these areas.
I'll just start by saying that unfortunately there's been a national reduction in the funding available for adult skills funding. So it's impacting on us and all the other providers within the region and nationally. However, Cambridgeshire Skills, Cambridgeshire County Council does work with other providers locally. So we share our plans and look, so we're not duplicating, so we get the best use of funds. For example, in Wisbech, we work with COWA, the College of West Anglia, where we do low-level qualifications, looking to progress into the higher level stuff. We also are talking with the College of West Suffolk, who deliver out of Ely Sixth Form, again, just to make sure that there is sort of a coherent offer that meets the needs of those communities, and we're not competing, because there's no need to compete, because we've all, could deliver a lot more. I attend a meeting of all the principals with the combined authority, and we're all going, we could do with more money, not less. So again, it's how we best use the money that we've got. But there is certainly a spirit of collaboration where we come together, and the combined authority facilitate that, bring us together on a regular basis, where we work and look to try and achieve that.
So thank you very much, Tom, for your presentation and report. It's mainly going to be comments from me, to be honest. I think we will all be in agreement that it's a great shame that we are seeing our funding reduced, but given the excellent, not quite literally, but the excellent feedback from Ofsted in the latest report, and the great work that the skills team has been doing, and all the education we've been delivering, is wonderful to see. And I really look forward to seeing how you progress with these budgetary challenges, but every faith in the team. And I think we would all just welcome updates as and when you can on how you're getting on in the new budget. Thank you.
I'll certainly get those to you. Thank you.
Members, I see no other hands around the room. Tom, I would just like to say that this is obviously an extremely important area, and I've personally seen the impact that this can actually have on people's lives in a personal capacity, the way that it enables people who have left perhaps formal education originally with little in the way of skills. So the ability to provide the opportunities for them are so important. And I think it's been well expressed that, we value this service, and we're all disappointed that it's actually going to be impacted. Please do keep us updated on things. Members, we're being asked to accept the funding agreement from the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority and delegate authority to the Executive Director of Strategy and Partnership, in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Community, Social Mobility and Inclusion Committee, to sign the funding agreement under seal. Are we all in agreement? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you. In that case, those recommendations are passed. Thank you. Okay. So next item is item 6, the Coroner Service Body Removals Contract. It's another key decision on the procurement, and this will be presented by the Coroner Service Business Manager, Rachel Loveridge. Rachel, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Rachel. I'm the business manager for the Coroner Service, and I'm joined this afternoon by Sarah Abbott, who's our head of service. This afternoon, the report that I wanted to bring to you is the Coroner Service body removals contract. Hopefully, you've all had a chance to read the report. I'm just going to go through the key areas, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions after. So, this report addresses the procurement of the body removal service valued at just over £674,000. And this follows on from an existing contract, which is due to end in October this year. Just to note that Peterborough City Council will pay 35% of this contract, and this is an agreement with them covering a service level agreement where they cover all of the coroners, where they cover 35% of all coroners' service costs. So the report outlines the current arrangements and details how the contracts will be recommissioned to ensure that best value is in place. So the two requests will be to approve the recommissioning of the contract for the provision of the body removals contract, and also delegate authority to the Exec Director of Place and Sustainability. There is just a slight amendment. It's not strategy and partnership, it is Place and Sustainability in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair. So just to highlight the key areas of the report. So Cambridge and Peterborough Coroner's jurisdiction was created in 2015, and our base is at Lawrence Court in Huntingdon. The coroner conducts investigations into deaths that are unexpected or unexplained, and they will determine the identity of the deceased, how, when, and where their death came about. We have approximately 3,000 cases that are referred to us each year. And when required, post-mortem examinations are conducted at Addenbrooke's Hospital and Peterborough Hospital by the hospital pathologists. So the body removal contracts are essential for the removal of bodies when a person dies in the community and their death is then referred to the coroner. These contracts are typically held by registered funeral directors, and they perform this on behalf of the coroner. Under the current contract, the area, so Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, is divided into 3 lots, with one covering Peterborough, one Cambridgeshire, and then one covering Fenland all the way down into St Neots. Within this new tender, we want to split it into 4 lots. So it'll be one covering Peterborough, Central Peterborough, one Cambridge, one covering the Fenland area, and then the 4th one just Huntingdon and St Neots. I'm sure you appreciate the patch from Fenland all the way down to St Neots is huge, so we're splitting it into 4. So as I said, this change is necessary because one of the patches is so large. So the services that we will be asking to be provided will be the removal of bodies, so typically from the community transporting to the mortuaries or back to their own premises, storage, so to store the bodies, and then finally, in the event of a mass fatality, the body removals funeral directors will support the council if there was a mass fatality. So just kind of summarising the current arrangements that are in place. So as I said, at the moment, there's 3 contracted funeral directors, and they do approximately 1,300 removals for us per year. And as I said, the new areas will be split into 4. So this procurement will be conducted through an open tender process. This will ensure transparency and allow for competitive bidding, and it also will help us to secure best value. The contract term will be for 3 years with the option to extend to 3. Other options haven't been considered as we don't believe they will be financially viable. Funeral directors that are awarded these contracts, they do perform these on top of their day job, if you like. So just to summarise, the body removal service is critical for managing the cases, with contracts currently divided into 3, and then there will be 4 moving forward. This report anticipates an increase in the costs due to population growth, leading to larger transportation costs and inflation. So that's kind of a summary. Just wondering if anybody had any questions. Did you want to, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Just before we open to any questions, just to clarify, all of the lots have the same arrangement, which is the collection is within 1 hour. And it does cover the entire county of Cambridgeshire as well. So it covers everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think members, you will have had a late appendix showing with map showing the areas that are covered, which I think was very helpful for us to get a better understanding of the contract. Right, open to you members for questions. Councillor Goodliffe first.
Thank you. Two questions, if I may. Firstly, where we're splitting into lots, is there provision for us to end contract under one lot, but not all of them should any issues arise, or indeed if a company wanted to end their own contract rather than go through the extension process? And secondly, are we happy that the 35% from Peterborough City Council covers the amount that it costs for their service?
Thank you. So the contracts will all be separate. So each lot will be tendered for separately. So if there is a problem in one area, then we can address that without interfering with the contracts for the other areas. In relation to best value, in relation to the 35%, that is something which is under review. So as part of the SLA that was established or signed in 2015, it does have provision that in every January, representatives from Cambridgeshire and Peterborough can meet and review it. As part of looking at this contract, that is something that we have committed to having a look at again, and just looking at best value as we head into LGR, local government reorganisation. So yes, there is provision to do it, and it is something that as a service we are committed to looking at, certainly ahead of January.
Councillor Sif.
Sorry. Thank you. Yes, I also have two questions, quite related. The first question really is an assumption on my part, but perhaps you can confirm that this is a quantum-based contract rather than a fixed price. The price will be determined not just by the contract to do the work wherever it occurs, but on a per quantum basis. And I ask that particularly because you do refer to the need from time to time for bodies to be collected from outside their particular area, and possibly outside Cambridgeshire, period, where additional costs will be incurred. So presumably that's reflected in the contract terms. But it relates to the next point, which is for me the most important point, is there a real market? You talk about an open tender, and I wonder whether we really can have a genuine competition if there are a limited number of players. We have, I think it's quite unusual, and my chairman may find me this particular comment unhelpful, but you've told us what the budget is. This is a public document. Tenderers, if there are open tenderers, can see the figures that you've budgeted. If there is I won't use the word, let's use the word limited competition, it sets the price for them, doesn't it? So two questions, as I say, quantum-based, and second of all, the market and how that would operate in terms of the open tender process.
So thank you. They're good questions and they're valid ones, and they are considerations as we enter into this tender process when these contracts come up. So first of all, we do pay per removal. So it is quantum based. So it's a set price which is agreed, and when they tender, they will tell us what they're prepared to pay per removal. In relation to the market, it's tricky, but I would say in Cambridgeshire that we are, I'm hesitant to say this, but we are in a better position than some of our counterparts in neighbouring jurisdictions. So we have always had people tender for our contracts. But the challenge is, and you're right, that those that do tender do to a degree dictate the market, because there are few organisations who are able to meet the SLA that we have of arriving within 1 hour, and then to have the facilities that we require as well in order to carry out the contract, which isn't just your average removals. There is this provision as well to support in the event of a mass fatality. So they need to have these additional provisions, not just for business as usual, but in the event of something additional.
Can I ask the direct question? How many players are there in the market to go for this?
How many, sorry?
How many players, how many organisations will you go out to tender for?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number. And last time round, we had 2 historically that always tendered for the contract. Last time round, we had 3. So there was a new player in the market who had invested in their facilities. And that did introduce an element of competition, which historically hadn't been there. This time round, we're working really carefully with our procurement team as well to make sure that we're not falling foul of any regulations, but to really ensure that we are making quite a lot of noise about the fact that we are going out to tender to cast that net as widely as possible for best value.
I don't deny it's very difficult. So, yeah.
Thank you very much for the report and presentation. I just wanted to touch on what's probably quite a small point in our implications, talking about fuel costs, energy costs, and obviously our low carbon transport ambitions. I assume that there's no way that we can request that removals are done in, say, electric vehicles, etc. But when we are going out and awarding these contracts, could we encourage the providers to, I suppose, be as green as possible in this process? You know, if electric vehicles are feasible, that'd be wonderful. Where we're talking about body storage units, if we've got any renewable energy sources, etc. Is that something that we could do as a probably encouragement rather than request?
It is, and actually it forms part of the weighting criteria as well. So we do have a look at things like social impact, green energy, and again, from the last round of tender that we did do, that featured quite heavily actually in some of the submissions that we received, where they were talking about the types of vehicles and the energy that they were using, and also initiatives for the community. So again, last time round, one of the organisations that tendered were looking at providing counselling for those people that were using their services as well. So they are looking more widely, and we do encourage that, and it is something which is rewarded within, as so far as is appropriate within the tender process as well.
Excellent. That's really great to hear. Thank you for those responses. And then I think broadly speaking, you know, we have a statutory responsibility here. I think this is something that we could probably all get behind the recommendation. And again, thank you to all our hardworking colleagues for delivering such an excellent service in the area.
Councillor Hawker-Dawson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question around the situation where there is a mass fatality. How does that factor into the amounts listed here? So in that situation, do we still work on a quantum basis, or is it just built into the contract that these suppliers have to help with everyone who needs removing at that stage?
So the mass fatality isn't built into these figures, because it would be impossible to kind of predict that, and obviously that we hope that doesn't happen. What there is in the contract, there is a provision that says in the event of a mass fatality, the council will come to you to work out figures and contracts separate to the body removals contract, so it falls under a different umbrella. But as part of the body removals contract, there is a kind of implied provision that they will support the council in the event of a mass fatality.
Sue.
Just as a follow-up to that, as part of our wider emergency planning responsibilities, then we have a responsibility to have identified someone who could be called on in the event of a mass fatality. And so having the assurance that actually that is part of the contract, obviously should that, a really awful situation occur, we've got somebody immediately that we can go to who will be able to respond and be able to respond appropriately. But then depending on the nature of the event, then obviously we would look at how that contract in that emergency situation would be drawn up in terms of cost and value and things like that. But it's vital that we do know that we have people we can call on in the event of that happening that can respond immediately and can take account of that need on behalf of ourselves, but obviously the communities across the county, but also our other partners who are involved in emergency planning as part of the Local Resilience Forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you just... Thank you. Okay, members, any other points, questions? Nothing else there. Okay, members, so if we've got nothing else at all, then we are being asked to approve the recommissioning of the contracts for the provision of body removals commencing in October 2025 as set out in the report. and delegate authority to the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair of the Community, Social Mobility and Inclusion Committee to award and execute the contract. Are we happy to do so? Is there anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Okay, thank you very much. That is then passed unanimously. Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. Okay, next item is item 7, is a key decision again on the procurement of library e-stock, which will be presented by the Library Support Services Manager, Andrew Stoter. Thank you. Over to Andrew.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm presenting today a paper about procuring library e-stock. This is library stock that is borrowed through a platform online, so it can be e-books, e-audiobooks, newspapers and magazines. It's an area for us that's seen considerable growth since COVID, when we had to lock down, and significant investment. The key decision represents giving us flexibility to procure this, but it won't fix us to a set amount of money being spent by the council. So while I've put up to 550,000 in the contract, that represents the sort of ceiling limit rather than a committed spend. So we are planning to go for an open procurement and look at multiple lots. Unlike many contracts, we are looking to award to multiple suppliers. This is because of the nature of the market, is that we have suppliers that have unique content and unique licensing models. So we look to get the best value for the county by having multiple suppliers available. And that means we can provide a broad range of content and different formats for people to access. And we're broadly following the same procurement we did about 4 years ago. And within that, we had about 3 core suppliers come back on the different lots. So we're hoping to make sure there's a decent market out there. The only additional information I had from some queries I've received before was just around, in terms of e-issues, they represent about 15% of all the books that we issue across the service. And in terms of usage, we have around 100,000 people using our library service each year, of which about 2/3 are using what we'd call the classic borrowing model, and then about 1/3 are either using our e-services or borrowing IT and libraries, making use of PCs. Any further questions?
Members, over to you with questions on this one. Very quiet here. What I see is, looking in background in 2.1 here, there appears to be quite a substantial growth over the last 3 years in this service. Are we anticipating that the similar kind of growth is going to continue, or is it sort of reached its capacity?
It's definitely an area of still growth. We don't expect it to be as big. So it's still an area where we're introducing. I think there's a lot of people out there who don't understand the services on offer from the libraries. It's often not what they're looking for when they come through the door. And so there's an element of us letting people know. But we don't see the significant growth. So at the beginning of 21, we were still in lockdown. So that was one of the key areas of accessing your service. So yeah, we anticipate growth, but probably at a slower rate.
Thank you, that's useful. Yes, Councillor Vin.
Thank you. Are there any implications in this for the existing physical library services around the county?
In that we have one fixed budget for our stock, we would percentages and the way it moves around, there is, I suppose, some potential. I think what it's benefited us is maybe where we've had to store very large quantities of books that are maybe going out of date. We can make use of this, and then the library space is being used as more of a social space, allowing us to run groups and other activities and be a bit more flexible with it. But there will always be a place for the physical stock, and it's allowed us to really sort of grow things like the children's areas and the spaces there that are much more heavily on the physical stock than the e-stock.
Members, I see no other hands raised, no other questions. I have to say that, I like to read as much as I can. It feels like it's mainly council papers at the moment. But there is despite the fact that I do have e-books, I do actually find that sometimes just having the physical presence of a book is very, very different experience to reading on a screen of some description. So I can't see them disappearing very, very quickly. So thank you for that. Right. If we have no other comments on this item, then we are being asked to agree to the procurement of e-stock through a single multi-lot procurement exercise as set out in the report, and delegate authority to the Executive Director of Strategy and Partnership in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair of Community, Social Mobility and Inclusion Committee to award and execute the contract once procurement has been completed, and approve all the necessary legal documentation relating to the contract, along with any transactions, associated arrangements and their formal executions. Are we happy to do so, members? Thank you. Anyone object? No one abstaining. Thank you. In which case, that is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. I do like it when we move things. Okay, item 8 is the latest performance management report, which will be presented by the Executive Director of Strategy and Partnerships, Sue Grace. Over to you, Sue.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. So you have in front of you in this performance report the Q4 performance for 24-25. So that's the period from January through to March. Inevitably, there's a lag in our performance reporting. So this is for the end of the previous financial year. You've got a range of what we describe as strategic, the most significant key performance indicators. You've got a cover report and then the detail of each of those indicators in the attached appendix. Where appropriate and where possible, we benchmark our performance, and the cover report explains how we categorise performance. In other words, how we rate it as either red, amber or green. And we've got a number of green indicators, one amber and one red. So just to give a little bit of detail on the red indicator, that relates to the Independent Domestic Violence Advocacy Service, sometimes abbreviated to IDVA. And this is because the medium risk clients that previously used to come to this service, which is hosted in the County Council, are moving to a new arrangement with the agreement of all the partners we work with, and in particular with the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. And so from April of this year, in other words, the start of this new financial year, it's going to be the Victim and Witness Hub who will take on these medium risk referrals, so that the IDVA service can concentrate on the high-risk referrals. As part of this transition, we have seen that the police have been clearing their backlog of medium risk referrals, which has resulted in an increase of 13%. And so this has resulted in some delays in both being able to process those medium risk referrals and then engage with the clients for whom those referrals refer to. So we are working through this work. Certainly that's been passed to the Victim and Witness Hub so that we can concentrate on the high-risk cases, and we are expecting those engagement rates to start to recover during Q1 of this year, which you'll see at your next committee. And we set out in a paragraph in the cover report, and you do have the detail in the appendix, how that process of improvement, given this transition to one arrangement to a new arrangement, how we intend to work with partners to progress that so that that works well. And I do have Julia with me sitting at the back of the room, Julia Cullum, who's the head of service, in case you've got any detailed questions on that particular indicator. You'll also note that there's an amber indicator for the coroner's service, and fundamentally this is called to a change in the reporting period for the coroner's service from a financial year to a calendar year. So previously, when it was done on a financial year, we did see that a number of cases, that they heard a number of cases in Q4 to address their their performance across that year. But with a change to the reporting period, that approach has not taken place, and the service is been focusing on some of the longer, more historical cases in order to ensure that they've been addressed. And so the numbers that you see here reflect that shift in the way the coroner's service is operating, both ensuring that it is dealing with the shorter cases as well as some of the longer historical cases, and it is looking at how it manages those cases overall as they approach the new reporting period, which will be in the calendar year. Again, there's more detail in the appendix around that particular indicator, and I want to just highlight a discrepancy as well, because in the cover report it notes that that's amber, that particular indicator. In the appendix it says it's green. The appendix is incorrect. The actual indicator should be amber. So it is the one about number of live investigations over 12 months. So I only wanted to highlight those two. We are delighted to have some green indicators, and colleagues who've just left to talk to you about the library service, then certainly seeing the active users and the visitors to the library service hit the 2% increase across last year is something that particular service is really pleased about, given that it's taken quite a few years to recover from the impact of COVID on that particular service in terms of visits from members of the community. So you do have some green indicators as well. I don't have any more to say or to highlight, but happy to take any questions. And if we don't have the right expertise in the room, given that a lot of these are quite detailed and service related, very happy to take away any queries and address them outside of the meeting. Thank you very much.
Members, over to you. And I think I have Councillor Batchelor first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just on that last indicator that you mentioned, Sue, so the one around number of live investigations over 12 months old, I mean, I would have thought that'd be quite difficult to target because the number of live investigations is the number of live investigations. We don't really have any control over that. So, I mean, is the KPI really looking at how quickly they're processed? Because again, I'd have thought we wouldn't have had a huge amount of influence on that. So I didn't know if you had any commentary around that.
You're certainly right in that it is, I mean, we use the phrase here, don't we, demand-led, so we have no control over the number of investigations that come forward. But I think this is an indicator that's giving confidence to the service that both the shorter cases and the longer cases, that they're all receiving due attention. So actually keeping a track of the numbers that have come in and the effectiveness of moving those through the court system is something that's in this indicator helps with. But you're absolutely right, it's that the actual numbers coming in are not something that we can control, but certainly the coroner service, and I know colleagues have left, have been looking at the effectiveness of how they manage these cases through the courts over recent months, so that this indicator does help to give them confidence that that is working as effectively as it can be. Thank you.
Thanks for introducing that, Sue. It's really wonderful to see such great performance generally. I think my particular personal favourite is number 7, and just seeing all the wonderful work we're doing funding community groups. Just based off the decisions we made today, it's going to be interesting to see with indicators 1 and 2 what the impact is of slightly reduced funding. I would imagine we're going to expect to see quite a dip in indicator 1, which is our number of learners retained. Is that fair to expect, or?
I would say, given that obviously the number of learners will be fewer, but we would still hope to be able to retain a similar proportion of those learners that we do support. So I would certainly expect that we wouldn't want to see either that indicator dip nor the other one around the percentage of learners that actually receive and achieve their accreditation. So absolutely, we'll keep a sharp focus on that. Thank you.
Brilliant, that's really good to hear. And then I just wanted to touch on number 2. I mean, we've had between the 22 to 23 reporting to the 23 to 24. It's a big increase in our percentage of learners who've achieved their qualification. This is wonderful. I was just wondering, have we analysed where this increase has come from, what we've been doing that has helped us get to this point?
So one of the factors that has really helped the skills service was that when Stephen Boyer came as chief executive, at that particular point, Cambridgeshire Skills was sort of, whilst it was technically hosted in the County Council, it was operating somewhat independently. And what Stephen did in his first restructure of the leadership team and of where services sat within the council was that he moved the skills service right into the corporate centre of the council, which is often not where you'd expect to see a skills service in a county council. And so positioning that service alongside the library service and the community service under Lisa's leadership, and also putting that service right at the heart of the council so that the links can be made much more effectively with colleagues, for example, in adult services, has really paid dividends. And I think the relationships across and between all the services and colleagues means that there's Cambridgeshire Skills who are just delighted by the fact that they feel right at the heart of the council, has really paid dividends in terms of the both the reach that they've been able to have, the links that they've been able to make to people who would really benefit from their service, but also I would say the performance that they've seen as well. So I would say that that has made a really positive difference to that particular service. I don't know, Lisa, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think on this one in particular, it's worth noting that as part of our Ofsted requirements, we have to complete something called a self-assessment review every year. And during the recent inspection, Ofsted highlighted how accurate that was, how well we know ourselves. And really what that has led to is us having a better understanding of the areas where we could improve that qualification attainment rate. And therefore, we've been able to target the professional development of our tutors. We've done a lot of work in that area, and we've done a lot of work around the additional support to the learners that need it as well. So that's where you start to see that quite significant shift in achievement rate.
Thank you. Councillor Seth.
Thank you, Chair. Sue, I'm a bit ashamed to ask this question because I've seen this table, particularly, the domestic violence table, what number it is, 6, several times, and I now looking at it and I realise I probably haven't understood it. In this sense, this is about percentages, not about absolute numbers. So domestic violence, I understand, has probably been on the increase. So is generally, so presumably this is just that part of the service that deals with presenting the case of the victim or whatever. In fact, are we looking at increased numbers, period, and therefore the fall that has in referrals to this particular service doesn't mean that much in itself? I mean, it's again, something possibly out of our control.
Thank you. I am going to ask Julia, as Julia stayed for this item, to answer that question for you. Thank you. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you. It's a really, really good question. So the indicator looks at the percentage of people that are referred to the service who then engage with the service. So your question around, is domestic abuse increasing? There's a very long answer to that question. Ultimately, we don't know. But in terms of referrals, yes, they are steadily increasing. What has particularly affected this indicator is that, as Sue explained, up until April this year, the IDVA service were receiving what we call medium risk referrals and high risk referrals. And what then happens on receipt of that referral is our IDVAs will try and establish contact with those victims and offer support. It's a voluntary service, so people do not have to accept that support, and whether they do or not sometimes depends on the situation that they find themselves in at that point. So therefore, we often find that we get a higher number or a higher engagement rate from those that are referred that are at high risk, because as you can probably imagine, they're at crisis point. Things have really, really escalated, and they're at a point where they are looking for support and they're looking for what their next steps might be. Where we're receiving medium risk referrals, the risk is not as high. There's perhaps not that crisis point, and therefore we don't get as much engagement from those victims that have been referred to us, which then affects that indicator. The other thing that has really impacted in terms of that indicator being red is the timeliness in which we receive those referrals. So as Sue explained, there was a backlog, particularly in the police, in terms of those referrals arriving at our door, as it were. And then we are then trying to establish contact with those people via phone. And as you can imagine, that sort of golden hour of opportunity has then passed if you're not making a phone call to that person until a week, 2 weeks, sometimes up to a month after that original incident, which means that we get less people engaging with the service.
I understand that. That's a very good explanation. Thank you. But the most important point here is it's self-referral. They are referred, but they may not engage. So it's possible that high-risk people could not engage for whatever reason that they have. So we don't know anything about them. They've been identified as victims, but they may not engage with this service at all, or any other service. Or I don't know.
Yes, that's correct. So the IDVA service is actually professional referral only. So between 80 to 85% of our referrals come from the police. So the police are called out to an incident of domestic abuse, and then the police will then refer on to our service. We also accept referrals from any other professional. So that could be children's social care, health, housing, anyone else. We don't accept self-referrals into that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's their decision. So yeah, absolutely. We get people at high risk who, for a whole host of reasons, choose not to engage with our service. The other actual challenge that we really face as well, which does impact this indicator, and I'm sure probably everyone around the room can relate to this, is we are trying to call people on a number that we've been given on a referral form. And I would imagine most people around the table can relate to the fact that if you get a call on your phone from somebody and you don't know who it is, you're probably much less likely to pick up the phone to that person. So sometimes we do struggle in terms of actually managing to get hold of people. And we do try and be resourceful in terms of how else can we establish contact with them. It might be through another professional who's working with that person, or going via the police, etc.
Helpful. It was about trying to understand what the indicator is actually trying to represent, and which I now have a better understanding than I did before. Thank you.
Before you leave, could I just ask one question following up on that? Obviously, these people are told that you're going to be contacting them, I assume. And would there be value then in actually telling them, being able to let them know, the sort of thing, or giving them some advice so that not picking up the call is something that becomes reduced? I mean, one of the things I know is if someone says to me, and you will get a call likely to come from a number ending 123, you're more likely to then say, oh, I'm expecting something to come through, and put yourself in a position where you're able to take that call safely.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the vast majority of cases, that does happen. So, for example, if a social worker is referring to us, they would absolutely be saying, expect a call in a couple of days, etc. Where we get the difficulties with that is with police referrals. This gets a bit technical, but the way the police work is they have what's called a secondary triage mechanism. So at the point that the police officer is with that person, they're not able to say exactly what will happen with that referral and whether it will come to our service or whether it will go to another service instead. So they will prepare victims to expect a call, but they can't say at that point exactly what's going to happen to that referral.
Thank you, that's very useful. Members, did anyone else have any points, any discussion around this item? No. In which case, we are being asked to note the performance information, and I trust that no one has any difficulty with that. So we move on to item 9, Finance Monitoring Report. for 24-25, which will be presented by the Executive Director of Strategy and Partnerships, Sue Grace, and the Senior Finance Business Partner, Claire Andrews, is here to support with any financial queries. Sue.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. So yes, this is the finance report for the year ending 24-25. As you will have noticed, you've got two groups of services from two different directorates that come into reporting into this committee. And so we bring together the information from across what we describe as the regulatory services, the coroner registration and trading standard services, along with the community's libraries and skills and the range of activities that those two clusters of services deliver. So you'll see that at the year end, across all of those services, they underspent to the value of £470,000. For those of you who are aware of the wider council's position, the council, as it approached the year end, was seeing an overspend across its overall services, largely driven by some of the demand services and particularly in children's services, for example. And so right across the council, we endeavoured to do everything we could to control expenditure, to be financially prudent, so that where we could achieve an underspend, we supported the overall financial position of the entire council. And so this will make a contribution to the bottom line of the whole council. You can see that it's made up of a range of smaller sums across a range of services, and as well, we can answer detailed questions on any of those points. But just really pleased that the endeavours of these services have contributed to the overall council position. But what we ensure when we're doing that is that's not to the detriment of the delivery of these important services. So we do scrutinise that quite carefully and manage quite carefully if we are have an opportunity to hold a vacancy, for example, that won't be to the detriment of the delivery of an important service to our communities. You've got the revenue information here. You've also got the capital information. The capital information is largely within our library service, as you might expect, and a good proportion of the money that we spend on capital through our library service is either through developer contributions through what's described as Section 106 monies, and we also receive grant monies. So we're pleased that we've received some grant monies from the Department for Culture, Media and Sport to develop some of our libraries as well. And we do have a 1.3 million contribution from the County Council, which was committed a couple of years ago through the business planning process towards some refurbishments and improvements across our library service. So this links to the performance report, where we've seen some library closures over a few months while refurbishment takes place, and then they reopen, and then we've got another clutch of libraries that are closing for refurbishment. So that relates to that investment. And Councillor Seif, you've already made reference to the Communities Capital Fund, which has expired at this point in time, but that some of those projects have already been delivered, and you'll see in the report here around the capital programme that we still have some projects that we'll be delivering across the course of this year. And as those projects are delivered, then we do put out communications and involve local members in celebrating really the investment and support that the County Council has been able to give to those community projects. So that's a quick summary. We can answer any questions on the revenue side and a quick summary of our capital expenditure and our year-end position for 24-25. Thank you very much.
Members, questions? Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just on that last point then around the community fund, obviously we have around £500,000 that needs to be what's called rephased. So what exactly does that mean then, rephased? Does that mean put to use to something else? Does it go back into the general fund? What does rephasing mean?
It's probably a technical finance answer to that question. My non-technical finance answer is that some projects, once we delivered the money, we knew that those projects, either because of the complexity or the nature of drawing down of the funding, would not all be delivered in the 24-25 year. So, and sometimes things happen within projects whereby actually, yes, things don't all come together around the project. So they're just rephased into the following year. So it's not money going back into the pot. Those monies are still remain committed to those particular projects, but the timing of the delivery may change. So that's my understanding. It's a more technical answer to that question, Claire. Just checking. Thank you.
So But my understanding with these specific schemes were that the schemes themselves weren't going to go ahead, i.e. they weren't going to be built, so the money we'd allocated to them needs to be put somewhere else. Is that not right? I thought there were some quite large projects that we'd allocated a large amount of money to that weren't going to be delivered at all, so therefore the money was in limbo.
So there was a previous scheme with large sums of money allocated to some projects that were not able to be delivered. And then that previous scheme was reviewed by this committee a few years ago. And the assurance was given around some of those schemes that the delivery wouldn't take place. And then through this committee, what happened was that money did fall back, you're absolutely right, fall back to the council. And then what we did was we constructed the scheme that you have in front of you now. And one of the parameters we put around that scheme through discussion and agreement with this committee was that we would offer smaller scale sums of money to more projects, and so that they were more manageable and there was greater confidence that they would be delivered. So what you have here is a set of smaller scale projects, and if my memory serves me correctly, the value was up to 40,000 as a maximum within this particular scheme. And actually this scheme on a smaller scale for more projects was very successful, and so far we've seen the delivery across the entire cohort of those smaller scale projects. There is one legacy project from the previous scheme, which is the Fenstanton project, which is still not being delivered, but we're working very closely with that project. And again, that was very thoroughly discussed in this committee previously about, yes, there was a valid project there. There were good reasons for the delay. There are clear deadlines by which they do need to deliver. That's a legacy from the previous scheme, but what you have in front of you is the smaller scale scheme, which has been much more successful in terms of seeing the delivery flow through. So thank you. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Lisa, do you want to?
I just thought it might be helpful to give you really quickly the detail on the CPCF. So the money that's been carried forward is my terminology for rephasing. The 16 projects have already been completed, so they're the ones up to 40,000. There's 5 that are currently ongoing. They're all in motion, and they are Somersham, Loves Farm in St Neots. There's a project in Warboys, St Barnabas Church and Cottenham Community Centre. And then there's another 5 that are yet to start, and that's Bury Parish Council, one in Wisbech, Wising Arts, Orwell Parish Council, and one in Bassingbourn as well. But all of those projects and the ones that haven't yet started, that was all agreed with officers up front, and it was quite often linked to where perhaps there were planning delays, or where, for example, there was match funding for the pieces of work. So we're quite comfortable about it, and we know the timelines for all of them, and if anybody wants any more detail, we can provide all of that as well. But the Fenstanton one is separate to this.
Thank you. Councillor Seif.
I'm reluctant to come in because that pretty well answers exactly what I was going to ask. The carry forward, as you call it, is the joys of annual accounting. You have to cut off at a particular date and things continue. They have the habit of continuing afterwards. I was going to ask, what's the progress of those projects? You've answered that, but when we awarded the grants, wasn't there a time limit? Didn't they have to spend the money within the year, so that it was all to be spent in the last financial year? So have we varied the terms of that grant? I mean, obviously planning is a critical factor, so if they can't get planning permission, or it is likely to be coming in the future, you can obviously live with that. But are there other reasons for the delays? I mean, each project's probably got its own story, but it is disappointing that they didn't actually materialise during the course of the last fiscal year. Sorry, I mean, it's an extension of the point you've already made.
Yeah, it's a valid question. I'd need to double check exactly the guidance, because it was 2 years ago that we set out all of the guidance, but it wasn't around spending within the financial year. It was about a commitment to a project proposal. And what we wanted to avoid was where the previous schemes, of which Fenstanton was one of, we did not want to be in a position of 5 years later not knowing quite what was happening. So we put a really rigid framework around those projects, setting their own timelines. And as you say, every single one is going to have its own story. But officers have been alongside every single project, every step of the way, and we're comfortable and confident with all of them. But it was never about spending within financial year, because I think, quite honestly, a significant number would not have ever achieved that.
Okay, Councillor Levine.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm intrigued to know what the strategic management line is, where it seems that we're clawing back money from people and then paying it to whoever is funding us. Am I understanding that correctly?
Hi. Yeah, so that line there, the sort of, it's like a minus line, as you pointed out. So the majority of that is the council within their business planning for 24-25 onwards, budgeted to use some of the Homes for Ukraine grant funding, which we got from the government, to recognise the contribution of the services within the wider remit of this committee, such as libraries and communities, and the work that they've done to recognise that work that's been done to support the guests on the Homes for Ukraine scheme. So it's use of grant funding. It is due to back out within the business plan because it is only one-off funding. So we're due to use it, I think it's over 3 years, and then it reverses back out in the business plan, and that line would come back up to a positive line. It is a strategic management line in terms of it's a place where we hold the budget for the management of the services, etc. It would usually be a positive budget, but it's slightly peculiar in the way that it looks at the moment.
Thank you for that. Members, anything else on this report? No more discussion at all? What I like. Okay, so we're just being asked to note the contents of this report. Thank you. So that brings us on to item 10, which is the agenda plan, training plan, appointments to outside bodies. This is over to Nick Mills, our Democratic Services Deputy Manager.
Thank you, Chair. So this report includes the committee's agenda plan and training plan, Appendix 1 and 2. With the agenda plan, I think the only change is that the September date, which is a reserve meeting, will be used as a committee workshop, as a training session. I'm not sure if there are any other changes. And the training plan, which isn't generally, there isn't much on it, but because there are a lot of new members following the election, there's some quite extensive listings on there, and it generally covers the sort of main themes and areas that the committee works in. And some will be covered in that September date instead of the committee meeting, and others will be some standalone sessions. But if members would like to comment on any topics they feel should be prioritised in that list, then that would be welcomed. The report also covers appointments to outside bodies and internal groups and member champions for the next municipal year, appendices 3 to 5. And revised versions of those were published today with the names of, which include the names of members that have been nominated for the various roles. And there are 3 outstanding vacancies sort of amongst them. And unless there are any late nominations now, those will be resolved after the meeting and appointed to by the Executive Director in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. So, members, first we'll look at the agenda plan. Are there any comments, questions on the agenda plan from members or officers? I see nothing at all around the room. So thank you for that. Okay, turning to the training plan. Obviously, we heard Nick's comments there, and it would be useful to understand what people see as the most important items here, and perhaps feeding that back directly to Nick would be the best way of managing that to ensure that we can try and cover the best we can. Sue, did you want to?
And just to say, in addition to each committee having a training plan, where obviously we're trying to focus on things that are relevant to yourselves as part of this committee, we also have an opportunity. We're going to set up on a monthly basis some lunchtime training opportunities which are open to all councillors. And obviously you've seen and been participants in some of those kind of opportunities as part of the induction programme following the election. We do find in this committee that sometimes the things that we talk about we want to share with our colleagues more widely, because of a lot of what we do in this committee has a wider application to other services. So as well as this particular training plan for committee members, we do have those other opportunities to kind of throw the doors open, if you like, and use the Friday lunchtime online sessions for all members as well. So just bear that in mind in making any suggestions either for this particular plan or for things that you think would be helpful that perhaps we've discussed here, but to be shared more widely with your colleague members across the council. Thank you.
So members, does anyone have any questions or comments on the training plan? Okay, and please note that we're doing lots of that in September then. Okay, finally, we've got the comments on the proposed nominations for outside bodies as set out in the set out by Nick. That's the appendices that were circulated just before this meeting. Is everyone content with what we have there? Is there any additional items, Councillor Tong?
Apologies, I don't think I have a copy of the appendices. Were they emailed to us or physical copy supplied?
They were emailed to the committee members and published on the meeting website.
Can I ask where the vacancies are?
There are 2 vacancies that are relevant to outside bodies in Huntingdon, and then there is one on the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough and Cambridgeshire Community Covenant Military Board.
Thank you.
And obviously, if there, where there are those vacancies, if there is anyone who is interested, please get in contact. I think it should probably come through your spokes, but please do get in contact. Okay. All right, so we have the outside bodies, the internal advisory groups, and the member champions there. I'm not seeing if there's anything that anyone wants to raise on any of those. Yeah, Councillor.
I just wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone for what's been some really good responses. It's nice to fill these roles out so quickly, and really positive to see people from all political colours getting involved. So thanks to everyone.
Yes, and thanks to Councillor Damry-Homan there for taking on speaking to various people to try and get this filled. It's quite good that we've actually got quite as many as we have done. All right. Members, if there's no other comments on that, then the next committee meeting is scheduled for the 16th of October 2025. Although please be reminded we will be using the reserve date on 11th of September 2025 for a committee workshop, with details of that session to be circulated closer to the time. And that brings us to the end of our first meeting. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you, officers, for your help and guidance today.